بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just to very quickly recap, obviously we are talking about the manhaj of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, methodology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We're studying a book by Sheikh Abdul Rahman Abdul Khaliq. He's one of the scholars from Kuwait, and this book is called Siraat, the straight path, or Usul Manhaj Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or the principles, the underlying principles of the methodology of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in terms of beliefs and actions. And this book has been reviewed by Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Baz. This book has been reviewed by Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Baz, and he also advised and encouraged the author to publish this book. So far we have covered the very basics. We spoke about Islam, that why Islam is the only religion accepted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also covered the first aspect of Muslim belief, and that is to believe that there is only one Lord, which is otherwise known as Tawheed Rububiyyah. Tawheed Rububiyyah, which is to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of His Lordship, to believe that there is only one God, which obviously rests on two things. Number one, to believe that there is a creator, that there is a God, there is an originator of the creation, there is a sustainer, and number two, that He is the only sustainer, and there is nobody else with Him participating in the creation or sustaining the creation, and so on and so forth. And this is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, and that is to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of His Lordship. Today, inshallah, we will be studying the next aspect of Tawheed, which the Shaykh mentioned here. The first aspect, just to recap, obviously, he said is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. The second is Ilahiyah, which is Allah's right to be worshipped alone. The third, he mentioned, is Hakimiyyah, which is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be obeyed alone, for us to obey Him alone, and to take His legislations alone. And fourthly, to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to believe in His names without likening His names to any of His creation, and without denying or negating any of His names. And lastly, to believe in His attributes, and that is without negating anything from His attributes, or without likening His attributes to any of the creation. So today, inshallah, we will do Tawheed al-Ilahiyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyah or Tawheed al-Ilahiyah, which is to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of worship. And this, dear brothers and sisters, if there are any sisters up there, this is really the most important aspect of Islam. If someone were to ask you, tell me in 1 second, tell me in one sentence, what is Islam about? What would you say to him?
Worshipping Allah, one Lord.
Worshipping Allah alone. Yeah? If someone were to ask you, summarize, I don't have time, summarize to me in one sentence, what is Islam about?
Associating in a partner.
Yeah, which is what it means. Worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal alone. This is the most fundamental aspect of religion. This is what makes a person essentially a Muslim. This is what distinguishes between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Okay? Remember, I didn't say that with respect to Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Yeah? Believing in Allah alone. I didn't say that this is what distinguishes between us and the kuffar. I didn't say that. I said Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Why? Because the entire creation, almost the entire humanity, believes in Rububiyyah. And we also said that the father of the Prophet ﷺ, what was his name? Abdullah. He believed in Allah. Okay? So the contention the Muslims had with the pagans of their time wasn't that they didn't believe in Allah. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't sent to Quraysh to make them believe in Allah. No, that was not his mission. And that was never the dispute amongst the Muslims and the mushrikeen of Makkah. The dispute amongst them was simply on worshipping Allah alone. This was the crux of the matter. This is why the Prophet ﷺ was sent. This is what the Quran speaks about time after time in every surah. This was the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, and for this reason he sent the first batch of his companions to Habasha, and for this reason he himself migrated to Medina, and for this reason alone he fought with the tribes around Medina, and for this reason alone Makkah was conquered. And thereafter, for this reason alone, did the Prophet ﷺ send his companions, obviously throughout the Arabian Peninsula, calling, inviting all the rest of the Jahili tribes into the fold of Islam, and to fight them if they resist. And upon this understanding, for this agenda alone, for this manifesto alone, the Sahaba fought against the Romans and the Persians, and they defeated them by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This was it. This was the sole purpose of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this was the driving agenda behind the Muslims at that time. This was the call. I cannot emphasize it enough. And the reason why I'm saying this is because today, if you see in the da'wah scene, you find many different groups, and the focus of their call is not Tawheed al-Uluhiyya itself, but one of the things attached to Tawheed al-Uluhiyya. For instance, many people, the focus of their call is the return of Khilafah. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The return of Khilafah is the focus of their call. Is it something right? Khilafah, the return of Khilafah, is it something right or wrong? Right. We all want the return of Khilafah. No one will doubt it except a secularist. We all want the return of Khilafah. However, Khilafah is not a goal, but a means to establish the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal on this earth. So it's not a goal in and of itself, but it's a means so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worshipped alone. Other people, they call to, for instance, spirituality, pure spirituality. A person secluding himself in his own house, abstaining from the dunya, abstaining from extravagance and so on and so forth, and they say this is in essence Islam. Okay? Is there anything wrong with spirituality? Is there anything wrong with turning away from the dunya and extravagance? No, nothing wrong with that at all. But this isn't the goal, this isn't the essence. The goal is Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from that comes extravagance and leaving the dunya alone and relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone in everything, and being content with whatever He has given to us, be it little or be it more, and being content with whatever He has decreed upon us as the sole legislator of the heavens and the earth. Whatever He has decreed upon us, we take it, accept it wholeheartedly as a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Tawheed. This is the focal point. This is the focus of the Muslims. So yes, spirituality is part of it, but it isn't the focus. It's something that comes with it. Khilafah is part of it, but it isn't the focus. It's something that necessarily comes with it. Other people, the goal in their life, their focus is, for instance, jihad in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, is there anything wrong with jihad in the path of Allah? Nothing. Okay? However, jihad was legislated not for its sake, but for a superior purpose. And what was that purpose? To raise the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala high. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلَ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَقُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. I have been ordered to fight the people until they say La ilaha illallah. So what was the reason for the legislation of jihad? Not so that we just go and make jihad. No. The reason for that is Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that until people worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So that was the grand mission. This is what we are about. If you ask a communist, what is his agenda? He will have his entire manifesto. If you ask the Labour Party, they'll have their manifesto. If you ask the Conservative, they'll have their manifesto. These are the ideas for which we stand. And these are the ideas for which we fight in our elections and so on and so forth. And these are the ideals for which we go and send our troops abroad to fight other nations. This is what they will say. You ask a Muslim, unfortunately, walking down the street, what is your manifesto? And he will be completely, utterly confused. He wouldn't know where to begin. Is it just the Sharia for the sake of it? Is it spirituality? Is it so that people are nice to each other, smiling, giving charity? Is it so that they can just come to the mosque and pray? What is it? And the reason for this confusion is the distance that exists now, the gulf that now exists between the Muslims and the source of the religion, which is the Quran. If they were to put the Quran next to their hearts and recite it day and night and every single surah, they wouldn't have a choice but to get the message that the main message, the central one running theme throughout the Quran, throughout all the surahs, is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is the purpose for which we are created, and this is the purpose for which we are sent to this world. Which is why a person may come to Islam through, by looking at its economy, or what's the word? It's economic system. Does it make sense? Economic system? Yes. It does make sense, huh? Alright. For some reason it doesn't make sense in my head. I trust you anyway, inshallah. So, I trust you because we have a middle class man sitting here. I'm not the rest of you. The economic system, if a person finds it so appealing, especially in today's world, subhanAllah, capitalism has failed, communism has failed, and Islamic economic system really makes sense. So maybe I should accept Islam. So what does he do? He said, I truly believe, I bear witness that Islamic economic system is the only correct economic system in the world. Does he become a Muslim just by saying that? No. How does he become a Muslim? La ilaha illallah. By completely submitting himself to the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his worship. And from that comes Allah's economic system. Okay? But a person can't just take an aspect of it and leave an aspect out. And the core element that must exist in every single Muslim, without which a person cannot be a Muslim at all, is for him to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone. It's so fundamental to Muslims to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. It's as fundamental as it is for a Pope to be a Christian. You can't get a Jewish rabbi becoming the Pope of the Roman Catholics, for instance. You can't have that. That's the most elementary aspect the Pope needs to have, is that he has to be a Christian to be a Pope. And likewise, for a man to be a Muslim, he has to have this elementary aspect of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. If he associates partners unto Allah, he is no longer a Muslim. He is no longer a Muslim at all. So, going back to what the Shaykh said, he said, توحيد الإلهية وتوحيده في إلهيته بإفراده بالعبادة. To single him out in terms of his ilahiyya, in terms of his worship, is to single him out in terms of ibadah. And ibadah, what is ibadah? Right, but yeah, so what is ibadah? What's the definition? Everything that has to please Allah. Yes. That's a good definition.
All actions.
Everything includes all actions, yes. But something more precise. Servitude, yes. Yes. Well, this is one of the best definitions, one given by Ibn Taymiyyah and used by many scholars, is that ibadah is ismun jami'un لكل ما يحبه الله ويرضاه من الأقوال والأفعال الظاهرة والباطنة. And this is very precise, and it's something that we all need to pay attention here. Because a lot of people now, they want to reduce Islam to just another secular religion, which people embrace obviously, and they go to the mosque and they go back home, and that has nothing to do with how they live their lives at home, or what they do with other people that has nothing at all to do with the religion. And they emphasize on leaving Islam within the four corners of the mosque. And this is, and obviously they have this very crooked understanding of what ibadah is. Ibadah for them, and unfortunately for many Muslims, is to come into the mosque, stand up and pray, and this is your ibadah done. This is the ibadah, unfortunately. Which is why you see, if you look at a life of a Muslim, it's full of contradictions. You find people who pray 5 times a day, and they have, they've grown old praying 5 times a day. They got grey beard and everything. And if you look at them, you see the nur on their faces. But if you look at their lives, how Islam is completely non-existent in their businesses, in their homes, how culture takes precedence over Islam. Okay? In their businesses, how monetary benefit takes precedence over Islamic values. In fact, in many of the cases, they don't even know the Islamic rules with respect to many of their business dealings, such that they don't even know what they're doing is halal or haram. And these are people who pray in the mosque 5 times a day. And they would like to go to a mosque that prays 20 or not 8, and pray longer, and perhaps go to Hajj and Umrah every single year. And you look at them, they got a huge mark of frustration on their foreheads. Yeah, if you look at their dealings, completely corrupt. Why are their personalities so contradictory? It's because the idea of ibadah which they had is contradictory. Ibadah to them was something you do in the mosque, and ibadah has nothing to do with the way a person deals in business, or with the way he treats his wife, or with the way he gives preference to his cultural practices over religion, and so on and so forth. Which is why you have these narrow-minded people, their lives are completely messed up. And it is normally their kids coming from this sort of secular mindset and secular background, who go to the BBC, go to Channel 4 and other stations, and they start attacking Muslims. Okay, these are sort of people whose daughters go to the media and say, I'm a practicing Muslim and I don't wear a hijab. Okay? And the Prophet Muhammad said this and the Prophet Muhammad said that. This is what happens when people with secular mindset, they think Islam is all about coming to the mosque and praying and then forgetting all about it. This is what they give birth to. These sort of people, munafiqeen, who bear Muslim names, but they're out there to backstab the Muslim ummah. Okay? Very important to have the understanding of ibadah correct in our heads. Right from the start. If this is correct, everything else that follows will also be correct. If this is secularized, the understanding of ibadah is secularized, then whatever is to come thereafter will also be corrupt and secularized. Don't think a person becomes pious just by praying 5 times a day in the mosque. Not at all. So, back to the definition. Ismun Jami' is a very comprehensive name. Ibadah is a very comprehensive term. Jami', comprehensive in the sense that it includes everything. Jami'un li kulli ma yuhibbuhu Allah wa yardah. It includes everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and is pleased with. But it's close to what the brother said. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and is pleased with. From what? What did he mean, this brother for instance mean by everything? He said, min al-aqwal wal-af'al al-zahira wal-batina. Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and is pleased with, from the words that we utter, from the actions that we do. Al-Zahira wal-Batina. The actions and the statements that are seen of us, obviously apparently when a person looks at us, and he sees us praying, he sees us giving charity. These are aqwal al-af'al zahira. These are apparent words and actions which everyone can see emanating from our bodies. Whatever we say is an apparent utterance. Whatever we do is an apparent deed. As opposed to aqwal and af'al batina. As opposed to utterances, words and actions that are inside of ourselves. Okay? So in our hearts, in other words. So you have actions and statements that everyone can see, and actions and statements inside ourselves that only Allah knows. What do we mean by actions and statements that only Allah knows? Obviously it's understood. Actions and statements, apparent actions and statements that everyone can see. What do we mean by utterances that everyone can see? Like Azkar. Salam alaikum. A person says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah. That is an apparent utterance. Apparent action. What is an example of apparent action? Salah, zakat, and all these sort of things. Now, internal utterance. What could that be referring to?
Intention.
Sorry?
Intention.
That is not quite close, not quite, but the utterance in the heart.
But if you dislike something, keep it to yourself.
So, qawl al-qalb is basically just belief. For you to believe in your heart. For you to believe that there is only one God. For you to believe that He is the only one deserving of my worship. That is a statement of the heart. So statement of the tongue is when a person says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Statement of the heart is when he actually has this belief in his heart when he's saying it. Because a lot of people, they say with their tongue what doesn't exist in their hearts. So a person can say, La ilaha illallah. But in his heart, he may have doubts about it. So yes, the utterance of the tongue is there externally. But the utterance of the heart, is it there? No. Okay, so this is the utterance of the heart. The statement of the heart, which is to believe in your heart that there is only one God who deserves your worship. And to believe in all the aspects of Islam.
And it's the most important one. As the Rasul said,
yes, that is actually referring more to the actions of the heart. Statement of the heart is to believe. What is actions of the heart? Go on. Yeah, intention for instance. Is the emotions inside. It really is the emotions inside. A person, for instance, he believes in Allah. So before I start, we got 4 components altogether. This is what ibadah is. This is what iman is. 4 components. You have the statement of the heart, right, and a statement of the tongue. Then you have the actions of the heart, and you have the actions of the tongue. Yeah? So, we know the statement of the heart is obviously to believe in the articles of faith and so on and so forth. We know the statement of the tongue is to say La ilaha illallah, to make azkar that we do in salah and so on and so forth. We know the actions of the limbs is what? Like salah and zakat. Actions of the heart is having this emotion, these feelings towards what we are doing, towards what we are saying. For example, if a person, he says, I believe in Allah, and I'm going to pray as well, and I believe that it is obligatory for me to pray. Okay? But I do not love Salah, and I do not love Allah Azza wa Jal. I don't necessarily hate him, but I don't love him either. Would he be a believer? He won't be a believer. Why? Because of the actions of the heart that are missing. Okay? That emotional attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely missing. That is a very, very important component. And that, in the heart, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that indeed in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is good, then the entire body is good. And if it's bad, then the entire body is bad. And indeed that is the heart. What he's talking about is the asl of iman, which is the fundamental aspect of iman. That's where everything else comes. Okay? This is where iman actually starts from. When a person has this love for the sake of Allah, love for Allah and love for the sake of Allah, and he has hate or dislike for anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, and he has this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that drives him to do what he's been ordered to do and to stay away from all the prohibitions, this is the engine that actually drives him. This is what causes him to believe in his heart about Allah's rewards and punishment. This is what causes him to get up and pray Salatul Fajr when everyone else is asleep. Yeah? This is what it is. It's the asl of iman in the heart. And which is why the actions of the heart are perhaps the most important aspect of iman that people should focus on. Because really, if that is good, then everything else in our iman and salah and ibadah will be good. And if that is rotten inside, then everything else that follows will be rotten. So, iman or ibadah is of 4 types. Can we go through them again? Number 1, statement of the heart. Number 2, statement of the tongue. Number 3, actions of the heart. And number 4, action of the limbs. Okay? And we are all clear, we all understand what we mean by statements of the heart, statement of the tongue, statement of the limbs, the statement and action of the limbs and action of the heart. Very important. So, if we define ibadah like this, something as small as putting a morsel of food in your wife's mouth is an act of worship. Because it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves and He's pleased with. Right? If you understand what actually ibadah is, then you will know that it is to be nice to your parents, even when they're abusive towards you. And taking all their abuse with patience, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for your patience. This is iman, this is also ibadah. And it doesn't take place in a mosque either. When you are out on the street, for instance, and you realize that you mistakenly take away your brother's right, or let's say you end up backbiting him while he wasn't there, you end up saying something behind his back which he doesn't like, you can obviously stay quiet about it, stay silent about it, don't mention anything to anyone. Or if you have this action of the heart ticking inside your body, it will make you think this is wrong and I fear Allah's punishment, so I'm going to go and make a move and apologize to his brother directly. So, ibadah,
you mentioned if you have the action of the tongue but not of the heart, you're not a Muslim.
yes,
If it's the opposite, you have the action of the heart but not of the tongue.
yes, all these 4 components are necessary for a person's iman. So if a person, for instance, let's start from the beginning. A person, for instance, he does everything. He says, I believe in La ilaha illallah. Okay? And he says La ilaha illallah. He believes in his heart as well. And he prays and he has the actions of the limbs. But he doesn't like Allah Azza wa Jal. Let's say he even dislikes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is he a Muslim or a kafir? A kafir. Especially if he dislikes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, he's coming with everything except the actions of the heart. And he's only a disbeliever due to the actions of the heart. If a person, he loves Allah or claims that he loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he loves to pray, and he believes that it's wajib for him to pray and everything else. Okay? And he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. But at the same time, he does not do absolutely anything. So, he's just sitting there, he sees all these people praying, doesn't want to pray. Never gives zakat once in his life. Never fasts. He knows all the people around him are all fasting, everything. Doesn't do absolutely anything. He's not even bothered about Hajj, Umrah, cleanliness, nothing. He just sits there doing all the things of the world except doing the 5 pillars of Islam. And furthermore, let's say he's in Islamic state. In Islamic state, if a person doesn't pray, he's observed by people that he's not praying. He's taken to the court. He's tried, and obviously he's executed for not praying. He's taken to the court, and it's proven that he doesn't want to pray. He believes that it's all obligatory for him to pray and everything, that he loves Allah and His Messenger, but he just doesn't want to pray. So the Qadi, according to the law, he passes the ruling that, okay, this person is to be executed next Friday. He's taken out next Friday. The sword is hanging on top of his head. And he's ready to die. He's ready to die for not praying. What iman is left in his heart? See what I mean? So a person who completely doesn't do anything at all, he cannot lay his claim to Islam. Likewise, if a person, he believes in his heart in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, and he likes to pray, or pretend that he's praying. He doesn't know the words, because if he says the words, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, he will become Muslim. But let's say he likes to pray, or just pretend to pray, just act out as if he's praying, give charity, and even fast, abstain from food and everything else. And in his heart he actually loves Allah and His Messenger. But he never said once La ilaha illallah. He never once uttered with his tongue that I testify that there is no one worthy of worship except one God. What is the ruling on him? He is also a kafir. He is not a Muslim. An example of that from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ is who? Abu Talib. Abu Talib. He believed in the Prophet ﷺ. He has, he used to sing this verses of poetry, that if it wasn't for the people, I would have believed in my nephew. Okay? So he is someone who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he also believed in his heart that only He deserves to be worshipped alone. The only thing that kept him from paradise was kalima. Just a statement, literally, utterance. And this is all that the Prophet ﷺ was asking him for on his dying bed. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ didn't say to him, Ya Am, believe and I'll save you on the day of judgment. He said, just kalima, just say it. Just utter it, with which I will be able to save you on the day of judgment. But on his dying bed, obviously, for the sake of his people, he didn't utter the kalima, despite of having the belief in his heart. Despite of having the belief in his heart. So, this shows Islam is not just about having the belief. Okay? If paradise was so easy that a person can just believe in his heart and be an evil liver in this world, do all he wants to do, go pubbing, gambling, this, that, so long as he believes in his heart, and still enter paradise, that wouldn't be fair at all on all the people who sacrifice their lives for La ilaha illallah. What is the point of having paradise if these people and those people all make it to paradise?
I'm getting a little confused because of the hadith where the Prophet mentioned that the last person who will, leave the Jahannam has dharra iman.
Sorry, has?
Dharra.
Yes, dharra. Yes.
And the explanation of dharra that you gave is La ilaha illallah. So that they said, and something of it even said that this person has just heard in his life someone who said, La ilaha illallah, like grandfather or something like that. So we see from that.
Now I think you're referring to like several narrations here. There's a hadith of obviously a person will be the last person in paradise, last person in hellfire who didn't do any action at all. There's another hadith saying that he had just a mithqal dharra of iman, just a grain's weight of iman in his heart. Well, that's the thing, that the grain's weight of iman is these four components. So if a person, for instance, this is the thing, if a person really believes in his heart, really he has the actions of the heart, he loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, truly if that exists, then its effects will be shown on the body, on the limbs, even if it's very little. And that could be the dharra itself. La ilaha illallah itself. If a person truly believes in his heart, and the statements, or he has the correct actions of the heart in its place, and he really believes in Allah's punishment, then it is impossible for him to live all his life and not do anything at all, not even do one sajda for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Impossible. It cannot exist. It cannot even be imagined.
What about in the case of a lot of children who are born into Muslim families, and it's not like they ever stood up and said La ilaha illallah. They've just was taught to pray. They start praying on the down coming.
Well, if they pray, they say La ilaha illallah, they pray anyway.
So in the salah, it's okay.
Yes, they pray.
I used to get confused when looking at the conditions of La ilaha illallah. In some places it mentions it, some other times it doesn't. The actual statement of it to profess the statement.
They profess in the statement in the salah.
In the salah.
As they're praying, yeah, they profess in the statement in the salah. So.
Yeah.
You mean if like a fasting Muslim, and then someone says, oh, you should give them dawah, something like this, but then someone says, you don't know what's in their heart, is this statement correct?
No, of course it's not correct. That's the thing, a lot of people, they say, if you see a person, for instance, going out there, gambling, drinking, living a life of promiscuity and corruption and everything else, and then someone comes and, advises this person, you turn around and say, you don't know what's inside my heart. There's not much left for imagination as to what's inside your heart if a person is living a life like this. Okay? This is completely stupid. I mean, imagine saying that to a torturer. Imagine a person comes and takes you, locks you up in a cell, and every morning he comes and tortures you, skins you alive. And you say to him, you're a really bad man because you're torturing me. Oh, you don't know what's inside my heart. You'll never believe him. It's completely stupid. Yes?
Because sometimes, that discussion comes up sometimes regarding certain issues, and they say, oh, but you don't know what's in the heart. They can't say they're Catholic because you don't know what's in the heart. Is it fair to use the hadith where on the battlefield the man said La ilaha illallah, and then he was still killed, and then when he told the Prophet ﷺ, he said, did you know what's in his heart? So from that, do we see that we judge a person based on their action?
Exactly. Many people misuse this hadith, misunderstand this hadith. I'll tell you, to be frank with you, this discussion often comes up when we have leaders of communist parties in the Muslim world. Yeah? So you have Saddam Hussein, for instance, leader of the Arab Socialist Ba'athi Party, right? He's a head of an ideological movement which is parallel to Islam. Does it make sense for a person now to go up to him and say, do you actually believe in your heart that Ba'athism is correct? Or do you actually believe in Islam? It's stupid. He's the leader of this organization. It's like going to Tony Blair and saying, do you actually believe in the principles and manifesto of Labour Party? It's stupid. It's utterly stupid. So, this is where people are using, you cannot give a ruling on them because you haven't asked them, do you actually believe that Islam is better than communism? Or do you believe that communism is better than Islam? The guy is a leader of a communist party. What do you think he's going to say? So, this is, as far as the hadith is concerned, then, the hadith, what happened? The Sahabi went, okay, it was in the middle of a battle, and obviously the kuffar, the mushrikeen were running away from him. And as one of the mushrikeen, he ran away, he fell on the floor, and obviously he raised his sword to kill him. And as soon as he realized he's about to be killed, he said, La ilaha illallah. Okay? God knows for whatever reason. It could be that he said this in order to protect himself, knowing that if he says La ilaha illallah he won't be killed. Or it could be that he was genuine. Right? So here's a case where there are two possibilities and they're equally possible. Right? So in that case, where you have two possibilities and it's not very clear that this person, is he really doing it to save his life or is he doing it genuinely? Obviously you have to take according to the zahir of what he says. If he says La ilaha illallah, you stop. Right? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ said. Because the Sahabi made an assumption. He said that he's only doing it to protect himself. That was an assumption. That wasn't based on certainty. And that is, you cannot compare that situation to a person, who's going out there, fighting Muslims, killing civilians and so on and so forth. And then, go and ask him, do you actually believe what you're doing is right or wrong? The guy's actually out there leading, a whole battalion against a whole Muslim population, and you're asking him whether, what he believes is right or wrong. There's obviously a huge difference between the two. Okay, let's continue, inshallah. It's very important to understand ibadah, what ibadah is. So next person comes and says, and this is, unfortunately, wherever you go, you have to deal with this issue all over the place. Especially so many mosques you go to and say, can we have a lecture, for instance, about Sharia in Islam, what it means, about an Islamic state. No, brother, this mosque is no for political reason, no, it's outside. Alhamdulillah for this mosque. Alhamdulillah for this mosque. But it just frustrates you how many people have this sort of secular understanding of ibadah. Very much like Christianity, the way they seek, Christianity is just once a week, go to the church, and you come back and you do what the hell you like to people's lives. You can bomb people to the Stone Age, and go to the church on a Sunday with clear conscience. This is what Christianity is about. And this is what they want to turn Islam into as well. And that's something that we should try to discover. If we have any of these sort of ideas in our lives, are we sometimes saying, okay, this, what we're doing in worship, in terms of praying and fasting, this is ibadah. But let me not get involved in political issues. Let's just leave that to the politicians. Is it right attitude to have to start with? Or is it a result of a secular mindset? A secular mindset that says ibadah is in the mosque. And whatever outside, that exists outside is for whoever else. Is what obviously happened to Christianity. Render unto God what is God's, and unto Caesar what is Caesar's. For as far as the Muslims are concerned, everything belongs to God and nothing belongs to Caesar. So, anyway, and then the Shaykh says, وَالْعُبُودِيَّةُ لِلَّهِ تَتَضَمَّنُ غاية الذل والخضوع مع غاية الحب والرجاء والخوف والانقياد له. That, what does it mean, ubudiyah, servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It means غاية الذل, meaning the ultimate reduction of human value in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't know how else to put it in English, but it's the ultimate, not debasement or humiliation, but humility in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is the lowest you can put yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is servitude. Okay? And these are sort of dimensions of ibadah that are very, very important for us to remember. What does it mean when a person becomes a Muslim? Islam itself, what does it mean? Okay? A lot of people, they call themselves Muslims. But you tell them, certain aspects of Sharia, they'll ask questions. But why is it like this? Why do I have to do that? Why is Maghrib 3 not 4? Why is Fajr 2 not 4? Always why. Yet Islam means what? Surrender, submission. What happens when a person surrenders? Can you imagine a person, a soldier comes pointing his gun at another soldier, a prisoner of war, and he says, surrender, put your gun down. But why? Explain to me rationally. I don't understand. I can't surrender to anything I don't understand. Yeah? What do you think will happen? You'll be shot dead. And that's the problem with a lot of people. They do not understand the meaning of Islam. What are they actually submitting to? What it entails to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Submission not only means, okay, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. Okay? It means, completely going just hitting the ground and literally sujood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what really shows the humility a person can demonstrate to Allah Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what really servitude is, to consider oneself completely low, utterly low and valueless in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal khudu', and that is to completely subjugate himself to Allah's will in obedience. As it happens, when a slave stands in front of the master, he bows his head like this in subjugation. At your will, master. It's like that khudu', being at the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times, at every place. Though in a way in which a person will never be able to show his servitude to anyone else at all. So it's غاية الذل الخضوع مع غاية الحب والرجاء والخوف. So having this humility on the one hand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the other hand admiring Him, adoring Him, loving Him for who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what He has done to us and for us. This is also very obviously, as I said, we're talking about all of this in ghayat al-dhul and khudu' and hub and raja and khawf. That, humility and subjugating oneself to the will of Allah, and love and hope and fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment for us. All of these things, what are they? Actions of the limbs, statements of the limbs, what are they? Actions of the heart. You see, essentially this is what ibadah is. So if a person has the dhul and khudu' to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will not bow his head down to anyone else. And if a person has the dhul and khudu' to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will know his place. He will always be ready to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks him to do without questioning. And likewise, having this extreme love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having this hope, true hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and having intense fear from His punishment. All of these sort of things, they are in the heart, they're deeply rooted in the heart. But the effects of these things are emanated on the limbs. So when a person really and truly loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he really and truly loves to stand in prayer to Him. He really and truly loves to stand in prayer to Him, especially the night prayers. An example of that is the Prophet ﷺ. The famous hadith, everyone knows, he was praying at night, and Aisha said, why do you have to pray when Allah has forgiven all your past and future sins? Because shall I not be grateful? Shall I not be a grateful servant? Okay? So this is the love of the Prophet ﷺ towards his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ar-raja, hope. Having hope in Him, it's so crucial, brothers. If you really, these are sort of things, these ideas, these emotions in our heart is what really set us apart from communists and capitalists and all these other people. Because these people are spiritually dead. These people have nothing to hope for except matter. Okay? They have nothing to hope for except money. That's the only thing that drives them. What drives us is something else. So when these people lose their lives, they lose everything. When we lose our lives, we gain what we have been fighting for. We gain what we've been striving for all our lives. And this is the fundamental difference between ourselves and those people. And if we don't have these, things driving us, motivating us, okay, there will be no difference left between ourselves and other political movements like the communists and the capitalists, who are just, spiritual, less, dry, and they just basically care about money. Their souls are completely dead and rotten inside. And this is what drives us. It's very important. So, ar-raja, for instance, having hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Having hope that whatever we do in this world is written down, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not cheat us on the Day of Judgment. And not only on the Day of Judgment, but also in this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let us down. And that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us, those people who do righteous deeds, Allah will fulfill His promise and give them the victory. Regardless of whether we are able to see it or not. Regardless of whether our children are able to see it or not. Or even their grandchildren and so on and so forth. But that having that hope, that if we plant a seed today, our grandparents, our grandkids will be able to benefit from that plant generations down the line. That sort of hope. And it is that hope that, subhanAllah, the early martyrs of Islam in Mecca, like Sumayyah, the first martyr in Islam, Sumayyah, she came from a very poor family. She had no tribal allegiances at that time to protect and secure her interests against the tortures of Quraysh at that time. She was very vulnerable. And her whole family, they were very vulnerable. You can imagine that her status was like a status of like an immigrant, asylum seeker in this country. Okay? Who can't say much, who can't sometimes exercise his freedom of speech in this country, because if the powers that be get upset, they can send him back, deport him back to the country where he is tortured. Right? That's why many people who come to this country, they have to just keep their mouths zipped up. Because they don't want to go back to the country and get tortured and killed. And so this is the sort of situation she was in. And she was the first martyr of Islam. She was killed by Quraysh for believing openly that there is no one worthy of worship but one God, and all these idols are false deities. She was killed for that. She never lived to see what became of the Muslims later in Medina, and the prosperity and conquests and karamat and miracles. She didn't see any of it. But the only thing that actually kept her going was hope. Okay? And this is it. This is what keeps us going. Not money. Not money. And you see the vanguards of Islam, although eventually later on, the armies, the Muslim armies, obviously they were regular soldiers and they were paid for their services and everything else. But the vanguards of Islam, the early immigrants whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises in the Quran, and He ranks them at the top of the companions, they were the ones who didn't fight or immigrate for money. They were the ones who just sacrificed everything for absolutely no material gain at all. And the way the Islamic work is today, I think people shouldn't be taken advantage of. Whoever works for you, you pay him something or the other and help him with his livelihood. But really, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people will just sacrifice everything on themselves without absolutely any material benefit in return. They won't say to the Prophet ﷺ, okay, Prophet, I'll work part-time for you, inshallah. Is there any job available for me? It was like they were literally at his service, and there were the vanguards of Islam who migrated to Medina and led all the battles. They were killed in Badr, in Uhud, and so on and so forth. These were the vanguards. And all of us should try to be amongst those people who do so much for absolutely nothing in return in material of this world. So, and what is it that actually drove these people? Is the understanding, the true understanding of ubudiyyah. The true understanding of ubudiyyah. And that is to be completely, humility, show complete humility to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, show complete submissiveness to Him, and to show an extreme sense of love, and to have extreme sense of hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to fear His punishment the way it ought to be feared. وَالْإِنْقِيَادُ لَهُ, and to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever He is commanding to do. وَهَذَا التَّوْحِيدُ هُوَ مَعْنَى لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And this tawheed, this is essentially the meaning of La ilaha illallah. There is no one worthy of worship except Allah. So obviously it is a lot more than words. If you understand the essence, if you understand the different things that are at play here, you realize why La ilaha illallah is more than just utterance. And that's something that even the Quraysh realized what it was. The Quraysh realized what La ilaha illallah was about. Which is why they put up such a strong resistance against it. Which is why it wasn't for them simply a matter of saying, alright, La ilaha illallah, finished. Now leave us alone. It wasn't that simple for them. It was so great of a matter for them that they had to plot to kill the Prophet ﷺ. They exiled him, and they fought him at Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, and so on. You name it. They resisted with all strength they could muster. Okay? Because they understood it is more than words. La ilaha illallah. And unfortunately, many of the Muslims today have misunderstood or forgotten the meaning of La ilaha illallah and just consider it just a wording. A person says La ilaha illallah, khalas, he will enter paradise. Forget about everything else. This is unfortunately what the understanding has become. He says, so وهذا التوحيد هو معنى لا إله إلا الله أي لا معبود بحق ولا يستحق العبادة إلا الله. That there is no one worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah. وهو الفارق, this is very important, وهو الفارق بين أهل الإسلام وأهل الشرك والأوثان. This understanding, La ilaha illallah, that we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and worship Him alone, this is the dividing factor between the people of Islam and the people of shirk and idol worshippers. This is what sets us apart. Okay? This is what makes us unique amongst all other nations. This is what makes us Muslims, and this is what makes them kuffar and ahl shirk. Again, it's not because, we believe in a God called Allah and they believe in a God called a Father or Jesus. No. It's got nothing to do with that. We all believe in one God. Most of the humankind believes in one God. What sets us apart from the rest of the mushriks is the fact that we worship only one God, and they associate partners unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is really, and he says, وَهُوَ دِينُ الرُّسُلِ كَافَّةً, and this is the deen of all of the messengers. قال تعالى وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, indeed we have sent in every single ummah a messenger. A messenger with what mission? What was the mission of this messenger? أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. So that you may worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and abstain from taghut. What is taghut? Anything that is worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is pleased with it. Anything or anyone that sets himself or herself as a rival unto Allah. It could be a person with a Muslim name, Sufi Sheikh for instance. He says, you come to me and I'll tell you the way out of your problem. Okay? And when I die, you come to my grave and you make dua to me and I'll make dua to Allah on your behalf. For instance, many people say that. He is setting himself up as a rival unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas Allah, He tells us to refer to Him. He is telling us, Allah is ordering us to make dua to Him, and He's ordering you to make dua to this man instead. So this person is setting himself up as a rival unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many rivals, many types of tawaghit. Another rival unto Allah is a person who says, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, a person who fornicates, a man or a woman, they're both to be lashed 100 times. But, in my legislation, there's no crime on them. There's no blame on them, and they're not criminal for doing so because they have personal liberties. So, he's setting himself up as a rival unto Allah. He's saying, no, here's Allah's legislation, and here's my legislation. Follow mine, not Allah's. This is a person setting himself up as a rival unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, what is the mission of all the messengers? أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتِ. Now you understand why all the messengers got into problems. Yeah? Because the mission wasn't just about, oh people, be nice and happy, loving, here's the flowers, and smiles. It wasn't about that. It was about worship Allah, and this person there is a taghut. Don't follow him. Don't listen to him. Which is why they were controversial. Which is why they were confrontational. It was essentially part of the message to confront the batil, to confront falsehood, and look at the falsehood in its eye and say, you are a false deity and I don't worship you. And to tell people the same. Because that does is that obviously this person gets worried. He's going, hold on, this person is challenging my authority. Okay, so if he's a Sufi Shaykh, for instance, he'll muster whatever strength he can to character assassinate you, to say this and that, everything about you he can. Or, if he's a legislator or a ruler of a country, he'll get his security forces after you, get you in prison, exiled, killed, whatever he can. And this is what happened. Which is why, you see, being a prophet is not an easy job. This is why Abraham had to leave, from place to place, immigrating. He was never able to actually settle down and live a happy life with a wife, and kids and stuff. That wasn't his life. And likewise, look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't an easy life. And look at the life of Jesus himself. It wasn't an easy life. He wasn't a sort of person of, love and mercy, everyone hug each other. After all, they also attempted to crucify him. They were also upset. So much so that even they conspired against him, going all the way up to the level of the Roman Empire, thinking this guy is claiming a kingdom to himself and he's a challenge to our kingdom. That's how they conspired against him, because Jesus was calling for the kingdom of God. So, so the Roman Empire at that time was saying, who is this man calling for Khilafah? Let's put him on the crucifix. And the same old story is just repeating itself. So don't think Islam's message is that of just love, mercy, peace, and turn the other cheek. No, it's about love and mercy, and it's about correcting the wrongs and confronting the tyrants and confronting falsehood and correcting the wrongs in the society. This is what the message of Islam is about, and this is what all the prophets were about. أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا نُوحِيَ إِلَيْهِ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنَا فَاعْبُدُونَ. We did not send a messenger before you except that we revealed to him that there is no one worthy of worship except me, so worship me alone. وهذا التوحيد هو الذي جحده مشرك العرب مع إقرارهم بالله الخالق الرزاق كما قال تعالى. Inshallah, this we can cover. We can cover in the forthcoming lessons, inshallah. We want to spend more time on this Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, because this is really the most important aspect. It's the most important aspect of a person's Islam. Any questions, inshallah? Yes.
So a heart that has dul.
A heart that has?
Dul?
Yes.
Will seek out Tawheed and cannot do shirk. Is that the case?
Yes.
Is a heart like that?
Yes. A person who has complete subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be able to serve anybody else besides him. The person who is completely subservient to Allah, he won't be able to divide that subservience amongst other people. Because that is called devotion. Devotion is not devotion if it's multiplied amongst a multiple of people. Devotion is only when a person is completely focused on one person.
And also the opposite of dul is al-kibr.
Yes.
That was the first sin committed in this life by Shaitan. And the problem there is just submission again.
Yes.
He didn't really submit to Allah's rule.
Yes.
And order. That's the same with Muslims today. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. Why?
This
Yeah.
why. This problem is this why? Why you have
Yes.
to do that? Why you have to do this?
Yes, subhanAllah, that's a very good point. The brother just mentioned that the opposite of dhul obviously is kibr, arrogance. And this sort of arrogance was depicted in the action of Shaitan, when he was ordered to bow down to Adam. And what did he say? But why? You created me from fire and you created him from mud. I'm better than him. I don't see the logic. I don't see the reasoning behind why I should bow down to him. So that was kibr. Just by not submitting to Allah's order was kibr. That was dhul. Although he was Iblis, he was a great worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a long period of time. Such that he would worship Allah, he was from the jinn, but he will worship Allah amongst the company of angels. And so see how a person like that can fall from grace. And may Allah protect us all. No one is safe from misguidance. And so the arrogance, again, talk about arrogance. Many people, they can be arrogant to Allah. Okay? And say, why is it like this and why is that like that? I don't want to do this if I don't understand this. And they could be arrogant to other people. In the sense that they can say, I am a pious person. This person is just a fasiq. I saw him drink the other day. I saw him do A, B, C, D and so on and so forth. That sort of arrogance, like the sort of arrogance that shaitan depicted, that I am better than him, can lead a person eventually to showing arrogance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And arrogance, kibriya is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. That is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Any question?
Related to that question, you see if a tawhid asks you to basically worship him, are you allowed to have the arrogance towards that tawhid?
It's not arrogance as such. This is not arrogance, that's pride. There's a difference between pride and arrogance. Subtle difference. Pride, for instance, I'm proud of the fact that I am submitting myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm proud of the fact that I'm not a slave to anyone else except Allah. I take pride in my Islamic identity. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that sort of pride. But arrogance is, the way the Prophet ﷺ defined it, arrogance is to belittle a person. To, put him down. Put him down below his station, not to recognize his virtues. That is arrogance.
Shouldn't we do this to tawhid?
No, arrogance, to be honest, there's something else. You should not, even if the person is the worst of Allah's creation, you should not put a person above his level or below his level. So even if he's a taghut. Like shaitan. What happened? Shaitan came to Abu Hurairah and then told him something. And Abu Hurairah, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, well, this person, he came, he taught this to me, at al-Kursi. And the Prophet ﷺ said, he's shaitan. He's a compulsive liar who spoke the truth. Compulsive liar who spoke the truth. So even someone like Iblis can have a virtue, a truth. Okay? As a Muslim, and that's what really makes us different from the rest of the kuffar, is that we are balanced and we are just with Allah's creation, no matter how evil they are. We are just with everyone. No, you can say that, la'natullahi alayhi, because
someone said to me, I said it once, someone said you shouldn't say it because when he gets, there's a hadith that he gets, he rejoices at this kind of thing when you insult someone.
No, that's when you insult a brother. That's when you insult a brother. And obviously he's referring to the incident where the had was being applied once on a companion. And I think one of the companions, Khalid bin Walid, I can't remember. As the had was being applied, and he said, La'natullah alayh. What is wrong with him? I think it was the companion who would constantly drink and get caught and get lashed and get drunk and get caught and lashed again. So he said, what is wrong with this guy? La'natullah alayh. Umar who said it. So, he said, La'natullah alayh. So the Prophet said, do not aid the shaitan against your brother. La'na, what does la'na mean? It means curse, but what does curse mean? Yes, but it's more to it, obviously. Yes, in a sense that al-bu'd, meaning there's no hope for him, that Allah will probably never ever have mercy on him. That he will just be distant from Allah's mercy. May Allah not have mercy on him, basically. It's like that. Okay? It's a very strong thing to say. Very strong thing to say about anyone.
It's a cultural thing that,
yeah.
showing Yehud as well. They say this a lot when the Jewish person walking by, they'll say La'natullah alayh.
Well, I don't know about an individual. Okay? But nations, like an individual has been mentioned in the Quran. Like the Iblis. Iblis, for instance, he has been cursed. The Yahud and Nasara, as a category, have been cursed. But if a person walking down the street, he's probably Jewish or Christian, whatever, he's never heard of Islam, there's no point of saying Lanatullah alayhi, because he don't know Allah will guide him to Islam. How many people sitting in the mosque were kuffar, okay, and Allah guided them to Islam? But la'na is a very strong term.
And there's a difference between la'nat malaika and la'nat Allah.
Yes.
I mean, people sometimes they just make confusion about it. I mean, because also in the Quran it says, أَلَا لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. I can't remember read ayah, but I mean, we can find sometimes.
La'na of Allah and the malaika wal nas ajma'in. Yes. Yes, subhanAllah. Yeah, of course, the la'na of Allah Azza wa Jal is the greatest. Damn, it's the same meaning.
Damn, but like anything disrespectful, basically, when you swear, you know.
Shaitan will be quite happy you can call idiot. I mean,
In that sense, but not what we're talking about. We're talking about in English, like a person might, swear and
oh, yeah. No, a person shouldn't swear at shaitan. He's trying to keep his tongue clean. A Muslim is not the person, as the Prophet said, a Muslim is not the one who swears and even does la'an frequently. But a person, Muslim shouldn't use bad words and dirty his tongue anyway, regardless. But la'an is something which is not a swear word. It is still a very strong word. It's something to hope for any person.
Just back to ibadah. Could we say that because ibadah is related to the level of excellency in famous hadith Qudsi, where we Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that الإحسان أن تعبد الله كما أنك تراه إن لم تكن تراه فاعلم أنه يراك. And from there, could we conclude that ibadah is something related to everything in our life?
Yes.
We do in our life. And my question is, how do we classify Tawheed al-Ubudiyya within your 4 classes? I mean, within the 4 categories of Tawheed you have mentioned.
How do we classify Tawheed among the 4 categories that we've mentioned?
Yeah. I mean,
Ubudiyya, that it comprises of the 4 categories of Iman, which is why I said Ibadah, as the Shaykh says here, وَتَوْحِيدُهُ فِي إِلَاهِيَتِهِ بِإِفْرَادِهِ بِالْعِبَادَةِ وَهِيَ اسم جامع لكل ما يحبه الله ويرضاه من الأقوال والأفعال الظاهرة والباطنة. So Ibadah is actually all of that. Ibadah comprises of all of these categories. It comprises of statements of the heart and statements of the tongue, as it comprises of the actions of the limbs and actions of the heart. So all of that is comprehensive. That's the key word to understand. It's comprehensive. It's not just something you do externally. It's not something you do by spending money. It's something that encompasses even your thoughts. Even when you think good of a brother, this is just a thought in your mind. Let's say you see your brother doing something, you're suspecting he's doing something wrong, but you give him husnul dhann in your head. This is ibadah. Because this is something Allah loves. And this is from the actions of the heart and the statements of the heart. You haven't said anything, you haven't done anything. But this is something that's happened in your heart and your mind. And that itself is ibadah, and for that you will be rewarded. Okay.
Being considered as certain countries, like non-Muslim countries, and being obliged to respect certain laws. So where's the limit, where's the borderline between respecting these laws or obeying these laws and actual servitude?
I mean, the laws that exist could be generally categorized into three categories. Okay? Laws in a country that are in complete agreement with Islamic laws. For instance, prohibition of murder and theft and so on and so forth. These laws are in complete agreement with Islamic laws. So yes, we are obliged to uphold these laws, especially the laws that agree with the Sharia. Then there are laws that completely disagree with the Sharia altogether. And that's where the problem arises here. For Muslims living in this country, if there is a law, for example, car insurance, okay? Car insurance, it involves gharar, gambling, and so on and so forth, and due to which the scholars say it is haram for a person to get his car insured. But what happens if you do not insure your car? You get into trouble, okay? You cannot drive, and obviously you can't live your life in this country without driving and so on and so forth. It makes your life very difficult. So, the scholars say in that sort of case, a person is allowed to take the lesser of the two evils, which is either live a life of immense hardship, immense, not just any hardship, but immense hardship, suffer, or drive and potentially go to prison, or just pay the lowest form of insurance he can pay for, which is the one third party only, not comprehensive. Okay, so this is in terms of laws where you cannot avoid, because if you don't obey those laws, you are in danger of being put away or so on and so forth. So in that case you are coerced. In that case you are forced, and inshallah Allah Azza wa Jal will forgive of this ummah whatever it does in terms of forgetfulness or coercion and so on. And then there are a majority of the laws in this country. Okay, that's the second category. Majority of the laws in this country are laws which neither agree with Islam explicitly nor disagree with Islam explicitly. These are laws which you can perhaps even argue that are in line with the purpose of Sharia, maqasid al-Sharia, the goals of Sharia, which is to preserve our deen, is to preserve our lives, to preserve our intellect, our wealth, and our lineage and honor and so on and so forth. So for instance, traffic laws. Traffic laws. Do they contradict Islam? No. Do they agree with Islam? Any explicit verse in the Quran, for instance? No, nothing. But are they in line with the objectives of Sharia, which is to preserve life? Yes. So therefore, we should obey these laws. We should obey these laws, especially because they're not contradicting any Islamic law, and they are in line with the rest of the maqasid al-Sharia. Well, if you're going to get in trouble by not obeying, then yes, I would say you should obey those laws. If you say that, from the point of view of maqasid al-Sharia, okay, it could be like, for instance, if a person digs a hole outside the entrance of this mosque, okay, digging a hole is permissible, right? Now, is it haram for him to dig a hole outside of the mosque? It is haram. Even though digging the hole itself is permissible. What's wrong with digging a hole? Nothing. But digging a hole outside the masjid is haram. Why? Because people may go outside and step and obviously fall into the ditch. Right? From that perspective, yes, obeying the traffic lights or stopping the car when the lights go red, it's not in itself a wajib. But because it's there to save human lives, people should, I don't want to use the term wajib or anything, because it's a very strong term, it's Shari'i terms, but I would say people should stop at traffic lights, and people should respect the speed limits, because they should look at it really, they should look at it, why are you laughing at me? I always respect speed limits, inshallah. but and obviously the urf, the custom also has a lot of part to play in this as well, because we don't want like Muslim drivers on the street just doing 30, where all the people are just like beeping behind us, get moving, get out of the way, or people overtaking. Because the urf is what? That 30 is the limit, yes. However, there's still a leeway for about up to 40 miles an hour. So even if you go like, even a camera won't flash at you if you're doing 35, for instance. So that's something acceptable according to the custom, right? But a person should try to stick with the limits, knowing that these limits are there to fulfill a shari'i purpose, which is to save human lives. You had quite a few questions there. The whole idea of insurance itself, that you give me that much money, okay, and if some accident happens, if you die, for instance, la qaddar Allah, or something happens to your car, something happens to your home, then I'll cover all the costs, okay, and something doesn't happen, then I'll take that money. This obviously, the whole concept is based on not just possibility, but sort of gambling, okay? And of course, you're losing out yourself. So most of the time, nothing happens, and you just give them the money and just lose out on that.
Anything that you insure is haram.
Yeah. So sometimes you buy, unless you buy something which actually comes with the insurance. So you're not actually buying for the insurance. You're buying for the product, but it just comes with insurance. So that's something you can take. But some products you buy, and it comes with an additional option of insurance, and you can't take the additional option of insurance on that. Yeah, barakallah fi.
What about we say it was like all like things like paying like council tax, because that's like servitude, because it's like.
Nah, brother, nah, I'm not gonna tell you not to pay your council tax, man.
More examples, you get council tax, and that's really, I don't think we're like.
I mean, these taxes, to be honest, I don't know. It's. They pay for so many brothers here, man. They pay for so many brothers who are on DSS here, bro. It goes out of taxes, for God's sake, man.
You're contributing easy. Some of that could go to paying for weapons.
Again, I mean, this, all the money that's being collected goes into one pot. Okay. It's very difficult to say how much of that money is going to defense, how much of that money is going, and plus you don't have a choice. You're living in this country, you pay taxes. You're living in other countries, you will pay taxes. Okay? In Egypt, you pay taxes. In Saudi, you don't pay taxes, but you still have to pay insurance for your car.
And the next question was referring to what actually paying is supposed to become like a tahut.
Okay. When does it become a tahut? Yes. When a person, for instance, he refers to a non-shari'i court, okay, and seeks a judgment to get something out of it which Sharia hasn't sanctioned for him. For example, husband and wife separate, okay, and they have a dispute over child custody. The wife knows that she is not a good Muslim, for example, and if she goes to a Shari'i court, the Sharia court, the Qadi, and the court will obviously judge in favor of the man and say the man should have the custody of the child because the woman is not on deen. So what she does, she goes to the non-Shari'i court, non-Islamic court, because she knows she's going to get something which she won't be able to get from an Islamic court. Now that is the hakum in a tahut, to get something of. That is actually going to actively seek the judgment of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is, according to many scholars, kufr dun kufr. I think there may be some scholars who say it's kufr akbar, but according to many scholars, that is kufr dun kufr, kufr of a lesser degree, in the sense that she's committing a sin by doing that. Jury service, you're compelled, number one. And number two, you are asked basically whether this person is guilty or not. In which case, you have your Islamic ideals, your Islamic standard of what is considered proof or not. And you can just, go to the table and say, okay, as far as my ideas and values are concerned, this person is not guilty because there isn't enough proof. And that's just your opinion as a member of the jury. That's if you know the Sharia. And, which is why if a person has to go to a jury, if he can avoid it, he should. If he can't, then he should take advice as to, what this case is about, and what are the burdens of proof required, and what he can say yes or what he can say no to. Or, he should just abstain. He can abstain at the end. If he's not sure, just abstain.
So to go back to the single woman, if she chose to go to not Sharia court in terms of the child, but does this make her passive or?
Yes, of course. Of course. She's alaykum as-salam. She's guilty of kufr, in the sense that she's guilty of lesser kufr. Okay?
The same instance if you give anyone option to judge by Allah's command, or you use the Quran and Sunnah to judge and you refuse to judge by the Quran and Sunnah.
No, it's like a person committing a sin. Or it's like even a qadi or a ruler, for instance. He has one legislation in the country that life for life, for instance. The person murders another person, he's brought to the court, he's judged and he's executed. But in one particular instance, because it's qadi's own son involved, he just lets him get away with it, for instance. Or it's because of a prince involved, he lets him get away with it. So, and this has been happening throughout Islamic history. I mean, all these kingdoms we've had in Islamic history, they were all based on merciless brutality and killing and everything else. So they all would just kill each other and come into power. They always rebel against each other. That was our history. And none of the scholars said that because this ruler didn't execute himself for executing other people, he's a kafir. No one will say that. Because the general legislation in the country is that whoever murders is killed, and it will generally be applied on everyone except the rulers. So as long as the general legislation remains in place, then of course you can't impute kufr on the government. But if the government says, okay, let's just do away with Sharia altogether, and let's have French laws, or British laws, or Spanish laws, this is obviously kufr. Yeah?
You don't believe in it.
Belief has nothing to do with it. Belief is not, we're judging according to the zahir. The person doesn't want Islam, he wants something else. He's changed his religion as far as we're concerned. He can brain fast all he likes.
Would it be haram if someone was to drive without insurance?
I won't say it's haram. You see, as I'm saying, all these sort of things, I'll be reluctant to say wajib, haram or anything. All I would say is that you shouldn't do that. I wouldn't say sinful or haram. If I say sinful, it's the same thing as haram. So, yeah, I would just say